Quite transformative, I must say. It's my first visit to Brazil and to São Paulo. And there's so much that I've found here during this week. So I want to start by the fact that I woke up this morning on the 26th floor of the Copan. And as I was waking up and kind of looking through the window, witnessing all these colors of the city and the landscape, I suddenly could appreciate the city in a new way, both because of the perspective and the view, but also because I was in a home of a colleague, spending the night, and really kind of enveloped with her life. And this is the experience of living in Copan and some kind of small findings on the refrigerator. I just wanted to point out to these two documents, I would say. One is a letter for the residents of the Copan, just probably something very bureaucratical. And the other, an image related to an artwork of Julia Park, who hosted me. And I asked myself, how did I arrive to wake up today there? And there's kind of a set of layers. So maybe first it has to do with a project I've been doing more than a decade now called the Home-Based Project, and I'm kind of here in that context. Recently, a year ago, I actually joined the Department of Urban Planning at the Technion. So now kind of more in an academic perspective, not only artistic, but also academically exploring artistic hosting and its impact on cities. I'm also here thanks to my friend and colleague Todd Lester, who I hope is here somewhere. Both me and Todd are deeply involved in the field of art residencies. Both of us started a project in 2006. I started a Home-Base and Todd started Free Dimensional, which is a really inspiring project that uses art residencies to host artists that had to escape their countries due to problems of human rights and freedom of expression. And his project continued, and then 5 years ago he started a project here in Sao Paulo called Lanchonetti. And I've been following this project from afar, and finally, through the opportunity of the International Seminar of Escola de Cidade, I was able to arrive. So I'm here also as a teacher this week, and this photograph was taken by my colleague Marcio Kogan, and it's really beautiful. But this idea of education and thinking about cities in a very expansive way is something that is at the heart of what I do. So to answer the question, how did I arrive to the 26th floor of the Copan, has to do with the exercise we've been doing this week. The group of students that have been taking part have been really incredible and really open and curious and submitting themselves. What you see here is one image from the exhibition, which I hope everyone will see tomorrow, of mapping the city. The homes of all of the architects, students that participated is kind of marked on the map. But more than that, what we did is an exercise that has to do with exploring each other's homes through this question of public and private spaces and the string ties between different homes. So I slept in the home of Julia, and Julia slept in my place, and people kind of exchanged homes for one night to create this like mini residency experience and to reflect on home from somewhat of a distance. So I want to kind of step back for a moment and share with you this kind of larger question, which has been really a burning one. And I'll ask that question through an artwork. This is a piece of Akshun, who's an artist from Belgrade, who in the 70s decided that art is such a powerful thing that actually you don't need art objects. And he just graduated from school, and kind of inspired by all these ideas about social art, he decided to burn all of his artworks and to do an action. So moving from this kind of gallerist art world setting, he went out to the public square and made a big fire where he's burning the artworks. But more than that, it wasn't just kind of an act of setting things on fire and destruction. He also sprayed all over the city this statement. Art is not a mirror, it is a fucking hammer. And this statement is something that has been kind of quoted from different resources. I actually couldn't find a definite source for it, but it's a statement that has to do with the fact that art really has the power to transform our lives. It's not about just beauty and aesthetic, it's about changing who we are as humans, how we think, how we live, changing society, seeing that action as a creative work. And I think this kind of expansive field of art is something that is relevant to all of us. However, wanting to believe that art is so powerful, one must ask themselves, in the neoliberal setting, when art is used and abused for branding and for real estate, is that really the truth? Is art still so powerful? So I want to answer that by telling my story. I'm American-Israeli. After graduating art school in Israel, the same week after I graduated, I moved to New York. I wanted to go back to my kind of American identity, and I still have family in the US. And I moved about 2 weeks before 9/11. And I was extremely shocked, not because only the trauma, which of course was overwhelming, but also because understanding what it means to live in such a big city, when so many people are actually far away from their homes and they come to try to fulfill a dream or a vision. And especially with this vacancy of the two twin towers, which were really the identity of the city, it kind of had created this shaken sense of home. So I decided to kind of, looking at all that and look at this kind of extreme capitalism and millions of art galleries in Chelsea, and all of that was something that I didn't find myself in. And I wanted to create a new context for experiencing and for creating and for sharing art. So in 2006, I was lucky to receive a building in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And the whole idea of the project was to really explore what home means as a place where there's a possibility to have exchange between the private and public spheres, a place for dialogue, a place for care, and kind of nurturing interconnectedness. Homebase has traveled so far to 4 different cities. It started in New York in 4 different neighborhoods, each year finding a different building that was given to me for a short period of time to use. And then it moved to Berlin, and then it moved to Jerusalem, and then to Saitama. So it's been like this long journey home, actually moving east instead of west. In all the stories and movies, you have like the journey west, but this is a journey east. The different buildings of Homebase, each one has its own story. When we come to a building, it's really about exploring the history, the architecture, the issues that come up by the local residents. All of that is kind of the basis for the project, who lived there before. And of course, each building tells such a different story. It's even hard to compare between two. There's a model and methodology that when the artists come, there's a few things that take place that has to do with creating kind of a research pack and a welcoming pack, doing tours with the artist, reaching out to neighbors with this kind of little pamphlet which we hang on their doors, documenting the entire process. There's a lot of research that the team does before the artists arrive to the site. Once the artists arrive, it's usually about 12 artists, sometimes less than that, from different nationalities, different mediums, mostly visual art, but there's been also architects and dancers and writers and playwrights and cinema artists. So they arrive for 3 weeks. They participate in a really full program, which gives them a sense of the place and gives them a sense of home, not only on a very personal level, but also by interviewing neighbors who come and speak. And after that, the building opens up to the public and becomes like an open house, basically a cultural center, which is free from charge. And we invite the entire community to really engage and interact and witness this process up close. And also in the salon, in the living room of the house, there's a full program of events. Okay. So one of the main things of a home-based project is this idea of connecting art and everyday living. It's not about the product at the end. It's really about kind of this exploratory undermining of existing power structures, a critical perspective about the city, about identity, about the surroundings, question that has to do with also the environment. So it really unfolds on many, many levels. Here you can see just a few photos from some of the meetings and events. It's also an opportunity for artists to work together. Usually there's kind of an isolation. You're in your own studio, in your own world, and here there's really this kind of sharing of processes. More importantly, maybe, is the fact that the public who would not necessarily go to an art museum or to an art gallery enters this space and becomes part of it, and kind of we try to create a sense of home for whoever comes in. So it's really diverse and very open, and there's also this kind of connectivity to the viewers. This is the last project in New York. It took place in an old hospital in 2009. This is the group of artists meeting as part of our program. Wow, I think I have to put my finger on this. Okay. And this is an example of one of the rooms. The rooms are highly site-specific. This is, I think, architects might appreciate this specific room, where the artists came in. It was during the financial crisis, where millions of people lost their homes. And she creates here in this old abandoned hospital a room which is basically about loss and evacuation. What she does, she cuts out of the sheetrock all of these pieces, which then help to assemble this kind of artichoke lamp, which appears in the middle. So this beautiful lifestyle object is really, the price of it is the deterioration of the entire space around. Because it was happening during the financial crisis, also lots of galleries were closing. And suddenly this question of what really is the role of art beyond the market, which is such a strong aspect of capitalism to sell art and all these biennales and the amazing prices in which some artworks are sold. But suddenly, due to this kind of shock of the economic crisis, people start to ask again, wait, what can art really do if it's not sold in galleries, if the market is somehow not the central perspective? So, sorry, there was a big article in the New York Times, and that kind of gave a lot of attention to the project, and it started also to be part of a movement of other projects that were kind of taking place inside this urban fabric and trying to challenge these questions of boundaries between art and everyday life. So I want to move to the next chapter, which is kind of a flight from New York to Berlin. What does home mean in Berlin? And in this project, I think it also has to do with this role of how art and artistic hosting can really create a sense of memory and unfold a new narrative. So this is the building that we received. It was part of a huge complex in Pankow, which used to be East Berlin. And this is an artwork of an artist called Antonia Lowe. Not all of the artwork is so kind of architectural. I just brought these two examples. There's many, many different styles. But I think it's really interesting to see what she's done. It's quite a formal piece. She created inside her room these two squares, which are kind of like frames. And very gently, she exposes the entire layers of the space. So kind of peeling the paint and looking underneath. And when you enter the space, she didn't remove anything. So all of the residue from the walls is in the corners, basically not adding and not removing. It's all kind of kept intact. But a close look reveals all these details. And the details have to do really with a historical presence on site. So each artist at Homebase writes a letter home, and the letter home replaces the curatorial text that usually a curator would write in a gallery. And here she writes to the landlord, and she explains to him what she finds in each layer. One of the layers, as you can see here, reveals the fact that this building used to be a home for children growing up. It's called the FDO. It's like a social scouts movement. And that opened up a deep investigation into the past of the building. So here are just some images of the surroundings. Like, we're talking about the domestic space, but of course the art project takes place in the surroundings and in the streets and in public space as well. During our open house in Berlin, a few of the neighbors came up and they looked really concerned. And they said, listen, Anat, you have to know something about this building. We knew it was used as a FDO, before it functioned as a FDO building, as a Marxist Scouts kind of complex. But the neighbors that came in said, like, no, there's more to the story, and we want to share with you. So this is a photograph, as you see, 1907. It's the same site exactly. This is the building in which the project took place on the left. And they tell a story which is, I guess, quite shocking, and it has to do with the history of Europe, and specifically with the story of this man, Ignaz Nacher, a Jewish businessman who was the head of a company called Engelhardt, which is a huge brewery, one of the biggest breweries in Germany in the 20s. And because he was such a powerful man, there was the thought that he wouldn't be hurt by what's happening in Europe. This is a photograph of him. He was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. He built all these buildings nearby the brewery, which were like serving for orphans and for older people. Really wealthy. He didn't have children of his own, and he was importing beer all over the world, but also in touch with kind of with really revolving the beer industry and making different kinds of beer. This is the logo that was affiliated with the Engelhardt Brewery at the beginning. And you can see it's like this angel with black hair. And 25 years of celebrating the brewery are documented in this piece here. But as the years pass, there's been a change, and it has to do with the alienation of the brewery. And the neighbors are showing us all these documents and the fact that the logo changed into a blonde boy, and basically telling us that this brewery, which was once independent and a very wealthy private company, became taken over by the Nazi regime, and basically the beer that was created on site helped to fuel World War II, because it's a major company. After that, Actually, the building was a communist brewery for a very short period, which is kind of crazy after the war. And then, like I said, the FDO compound. So when we looked into all of the history and kind of tried to surface it, suddenly there was this really dramatic narrative that had to do with the entire history of Europe in the 20th century. And that has become such a powerful context, and we asked ourselves, as people that now, as artists that now live in this building, what are we going to do with this? So we decided to look at the photograph, and on the same date, on March 5th, 105 years after this photograph was taken, we did a reenactment for one day, inviting artists, neighbors, beer lovers, mayors, to stand exactly in the same place. And for one day, we did a resurrection of the brewery. And we launched, if the previous one was launching a Engelhardt Pilsner beer, we launched a new beer called Ignaz beer, and kind of as a salute to our landlord. The story, I didn't complete to mention it, but the story is that Ignaz Nacher, after the company was taken by him, he was able to escape to Zurich, and he died a year after that, basically heartbroken. And we felt the need to kind of do something that will be a gesture and recognition, and especially because he's a very important cultural figure in the world of beer, which not many know about. But it's not just a photograph. It's the grand nephew of Ignaz Nacher, came from Canada. We contacted him. He came all the way from Canada with a family. There was a family union happening there. We collaborated. One of the neighbors was actually in charge of a brewing school nearby. We created this little brewing on wheels, and it's enough exactly for 99 bottles of beer. This is one of the visitors tasting the beer. Of course, beer in Germany has to be really good, because otherwise there's a really high level of of expectations. And these are the bottles of Ignatz beer. So this is kind of a project which the question of what is art and what is, what are the boundaries of art and what does it mean to consume art is kind of really expanded. So 99 bottles of Ignatz beer, which tell the entire story, as well as the vision of the artist and of Homebase for a new future in which home is really something that connects people. The logo, we used the angel logo, but instead of having not a black hair, not a yellow hair, but a red head angel was the logo. And we were able to take this project and travel in a van with 100 bottles of beer to Basel and to present it at Art Basel. This is the booth, part of the booth. And this is the bottle that basically tells the whole story of the building in this kind of scroll. The bottles are also hand-printed. There's like a mark of the brewer, and they're numbered, kind of like an art object. So this whole story, which was a really inspiring possibility to kind of reconstruct narrative and to create a continuity of memory, also has another twist, which in 2017, this building, which was really our home for a while, gets destroyed because it's an old building. And this is kind of our living rooms and like all these spaces. Of course, we created so many moments there and so many interactions. And I get a letter in the email saying, "Dear Miss Litwin, we have recently bought the building in Berlin," because Homebase is a temporary project, right? I continue to Jerusalem to build the next project, but and this was sold. So we recently bought the building in Berlin, Pankow, where the Homebase project has had its location between 2010 and 2013, actually is the date. We would love to learn more about the building's history and the connected Ignatz beer. We assure you that this is a serious inquiry and no spam. What they're planning to build there is a complex of 6 residential buildings, and suddenly understanding how complex it is. As an artist, you're trying to do something that has to do with social responsibility and kind of creating bridges over gaps, but then you have this capitalist narrative that's driving everything. And even the thought that actually our activity there in some way added to the value of the real estate. So that is kind of where I decided to take a break from what I'm doing, from all these buildings. And I thought to myself, if somebody now calls me and tells me there's this empty building waiting for an art project, will I take it? And my answer was actually no, because there's a critical context in which art is completely used for branding cities and for regenerating economic regeneration. And it's not possible anymore to deny that. So I decided to take a PhD research in the Department of Urban Planning to understand how can artistic hosting create an impact, and what kind of agency is for artistic hosting in the neoliberal city. I want to mention that for a moment, those of you who are not familiar, art residencies have been for a long time. They have a long history, but in the last 10 years, there's a kind of amazing growth with programs all over the world. It's probably also inspired by the fact that we live in a culture where Airbnb and the mobility is something that are kind of widely practiced. These are 2 websites which are platforms that contain a lot of information about art residencies. Today, art residencies are, like I said, not only for visual artists, they're for architects and urban planners and thinkers and writers. It's very wide. Within the field of art residencies, there's many institutional art residencies. I'm interested in art residencies in which artists have a concept and have an idea and have an aesthetic, and they host other artists. And the project is really an artwork of its own. So it's not just a residency of an institution, it's really a project that has creative volume and criticality in hosting. So just a few, I'm in my first year of the PhD, but just a few of the aspects that, of course, one cannot escape is really thinking, okay, what is the neoliberal city? How do we understand agency and compared to the neoliberal regime. And I just want to kind of quickly address that this is something that I'm exploring in two different ways. One is through neoliberal policies, and the other is through embedded neoliberalism. So within the neoliberal policies, in the last 10 years, there's been many policies related to developing cities. It's surprising to find out that art is one of the most prominent aspects. We hear about creative city, creative class, all these biennales. Like, it's really it's a driving force of neoliberal cities. I'm not going to get into the rest of the things here of housing and the crisis of public space, and many other. However, regarding the embedded neoliberalism, has to do with Foucault's idea of subjugating subjectivity, where it's not so much about the policies and about the governments. It's about the fact that as a society and as individuals, we have lost our possibility to really think of what does it mean freedom, different processes in which there's a different capacity to act, not by what is enscrolled. This is an artwork that talks about public space. Another aspect of my research right now has to do with the fact that public space has become so overloaded and so taken by privatization, commercialization, the surveillance. It's actually like no longer really a place of civil action. And acknowledging that, I want to suggest something which I hope is relevant to this discourse of all of us, where it's really moving the discourse from the public space to the domestic space, and understanding that the domestic space, again, we're not 100% in control of our domestic spaces, but there's so much we can do, and looking at the domestic space as a new platform for cultural and political, as a cultural and political arena. And I think that is something, I call it the domestic turn, but that is something that can open up new possibilities. An example of that is artist Tania Burguera, who, together with Creative Capital, did a very political project, and she rented a home in Queens, and she decided to live for 1 year with illegal immigrants, and she was paid like they were paid and living in the same conditions. I think it was 7 adults and 6 children, having this really intense year, and using this, creating something that's called Immigrant Movement International, using this time to be an advocate of their rights, teaching them English, looking at law, looking at their rights, and trying to find new ways to promote that. So again, the artist here is really someone who's taking on new roles and new capacities. To emphasize a little bit more, what is artistic hosting and how is it different than art residencies? This image is kind of one of the first art residencies in Germany. I don't know how to pronounce the village. I don't know if you both recognize, but Rilke was actually in this art colony. And it's once the idea of an art colony had to do with the fact that artists should leave their everyday life and go live in nature and be connected to this kind of more harmonious perspective in order to create. But today, it's all about the city. This is an incredible artist, Mirle Lederman-Ukeles, who in the 70s decided to do a residency within the Department of Sanitation of New York. And she made the idea of maintenance, everyday house chores, the idea of cleaning, as something that's the center of her artistic work. And she worked with all of the workforce of the sanitary department, cleaning the streets of New York, and of course making artwork out of it. Recycled artwork, artwork that has to do with kind of revealing these transparent jobs, which nobody really cares about these people. Nobody looks at them. And she kind of made them the center of her work. And recently she had a major exhibition of like many decades of work with this residency. Another example that I want to give is Rick Lowe, who's did this project in Texas. It's called Project Row House. He bought a row of houses and did a residency for a specific community of African-American women who are single mothers, where he invites artists to live together with this group of this community. 5 minutes, okay. And basically create this kind of new community of artists and single mothers. And he actually purchased the space. So now there's also like residency owners who are actually not just doing temporary projects, but really becoming owners of the space. And that also brings up questions and complexities about what the impact really is. So this is just the last example I want to give is a art residence in London in the home of Lina Simic. And she called her residency the Institute for Art and Practice of Dissent at Home. And using home for this idea of dissent, for critical looking at power structures, for trying to really understand that if we don't create some kind of distance in which we understand what's happening in the city in a different perspective, then there's no point for making art. And this connects to the idea of Nancy Fraser of structures of care, which is something that's so lacking from our culture. So I'm coming to the end. Thinking about agency and thinking about the right to the city and the work of Henri Lefebvre, I'm looking at the ideas of human rights and the idea of anti-capitalism. This is all based, of course, on his work, but taking out these kind of threads. The idea of both civil and poetic right to the city. The aspect that, of course, every kind of revolution, every kind of new strategy to change society has to be one which is spatial. It's about a spatial dimension, a social spatial dimension. The idea of the everyday as a source of inspiration, as something that is central to any kind of process. So it's not about top-bottom, but really bottom-up and organic narratives that kind of come together. And the idea that the revolution of the everyday is really about finding spaces for creativity, for playfulness, for leisure. Finding spaces in which there's not a very specific function, and that is their function, that they hold space for an expansive imagination. This is a beautiful quote, which is a source of inspiration, "The future of art is urban" by Henri Lefebvre. And I want to end my presentation by saying that not only the future of art is urban, but the way I see it, the future of urban is art. And I hope to be able, through my research, to kind of challenge some of the paradigms that have to do with cultural policy in cities, replacing or contributing to the replacing of all these ideas where art is used to a situation where art really becomes the driver of social change in new ways, and in which our homes are used independently and actively as ways that nurture further growth in that aspect. So 2022 will be the date which I hope to end my research. The vision is that this will be an opportunity to show this research of Homebase and of other projects and really bring forward this notion of artistic hosting as something that could be central for the future. I hope it will be not just academic research, but also exhibition with suggested policies towards that. Thank you very much.